Final Fantasy IX Remake is a game that we almost certainly know exists. It first appeared on the Nvidia leak a while back, a leak that listed several unconfirmed games at the time and almost ended up being 100% true. On top of this, we've had many journalists and reliable leakers reporting on FF9 Remake, confirming the existence of the game again. It's something that we have known about for a while, but the big question has been, when is Final Fantasy IX Remake going to be officially announced? I mean, Square has even announced the Final Fantasy IX companion anime that's coming, being worked on by a French studio, but the game itself, still not officially confirmed. Well, today, we got some really interesting news from reliable leaker Midori, and she gives us a couple of key pieces of information that explain so much as to why Final Fantasy IX Remake hasn't been announced yet. In fact, it probably should have been announced a little while ago. I'll give you a pretty big hint as to what happened. It also happened to Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 1, and it's a bit puzzling on how they made this mistake twice. But if you love Final Fantasy IX, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We are closing in on 99k subscribers, pushing to 100k before the end of the year. So back when Final Fantasy VII Remake was first announced, it actually wasn't being developed in-house by Square Enix. It was actually being developed by another company. That company being CyberConnect 2. Now I'm sure many of you remember this trailer from the PlayStation Experience event. This version of Final Fantasy VII Remake was quite different looking. In particular, a lot of people note that the cloud model was kind of off. Eventually, what happened is that Square Enix pulled this project back in-house. Now there is a lot of speculation on what happened there. You don't really see their name or logo prominently displayed anywhere on the game's materials. It is fairly safe to say that things between CyberConnect 2 and Square Enix did not go down well at all. You would assume that they would never let another major Final Fantasy remake be developed by an external studio. Well, according to Midori here, Square Enix has repeated history. But before we dive into all of this today, this is not official information, and so I have to hit you with the rumor warning. All rumors are reported purely for the fun of speculation and should be considered lies until officially confirmed by the source, that being Square Enix. Please assume that everything I'm going to tell you here today is fake news. And don't believe anything until you've heard it from the publisher yourself. With her saying, quote, "The Final Fantasy IX Remake is still in development. It is a title that was not canceled in the restructure of Square Enix during this fiscal year. According to conversations, the title was originally outsourced to another developer, but Square Enix was not satisfied and development shifted." It's incredibly baffling that they have let this happen twice now, where they have an external developer working on the title, they see the title coming along, it's not satisfactory, and then they shift development in-house. This has happened with 2 Final Fantasy remakes now. I think it is worth not doing this again. If they're gonna do like a Final Fantasy VIII remake, you should probably start with having it in-house. But I totally get why they would not want to do this in-house. It makes perfect sense. Remakes are something that you should be able to allow another studio to do. The blueprint is already there. All you have to do is just follow the guidelines, so you would think. We've seen plenty of successful outsourced remakes. For example, Bluepoint doing Demon Souls seems to have worked out pretty fine, but in the case of Final Fantasy, this just always seems to go really wrong. This is incredibly unfortunate, but it explains a crap ton. The reason we haven't seen Final Fantasy IX Remake in so long is probably because this shift to developing it internally in Square caused a massive delay. Because again, whatever another team is working on internally, you then have to make room for that. Because once you move the game in-house, you then have to assign a team to it, take employees off of other projects, dedicate development resources to. All of this takes additional time and additional budget. Not to mention, whatever aspects of the game that you weren't satisfied with, you have to spend even more money fixing those aspects of the game. The rumor at the time with Final Fantasy VII Remake and CyberConnect 2 is that there was a lot of dissatisfaction with the assets and other things happening in the game. It's entirely possible that that is another situation that's happening here. It's hard to say for sure because we have not seen the build that was being worked on by this other developer. and likely we may never see it. We may not even know who the other developer is, because none of this information was announced yet, and so it may just get buried. That, or it may be years before we find out. In either case, if you're wondering where Final Fantasy IX Remake is, this pretty much explains everything that is going on with Final Fantasy IX Remake and why it has been taking so long for it to officially get announced. Midori then continues, development of this title is now very far along, but I do not have any firm information on the scope of this title or a firm release period right now. This title could release before the end of the fiscal year. She then continues in the next tweet saying, there are plans for new information on some Square Enix titles at the Xbox Showcase. I don't know if this title will be at the showcase, so it is good to keep expectations low right now. And this is a title that is currently planned for release on multiple platforms. So Final Fantasy IX Remake, according to Midori here, is not going to be another Sony exclusive. This is a title that could even appear on Xbox, but almost certainly is going to be appearing on PC, and I would go ahead and wager Switch too. And I think doing that is a really good move. Whenever I imagine Final Fantasy IX Remake, I don't imagine it being something on quite the same level as Final Fantasy VII Remake. That is something with this ambitious, grandiose scale, an open world, and action combat. I also don't think something like that is really necessary for Final Fantasy IX Remake. I think that Final Fantasy IX Remake, keeping a traditional overworld map, ATB battles, and things such as that, I think it's completely fine, and I think people would actually welcome that. I also think it would be really hilarious, especially with this being one of the first major multi-platform releases since they have been on that Sony exclusivity check, that if Final Fantasy IX Remake, this sort of very traditional remake, what we're assuming, based on many of the details, ends up being a better selling title than Final Fantasy XVI or Final Fantasy VII Remake. Listen, I'll say this much right here. For all of you Final Fantasy traditionalists out there who have wanted a game like that, assuming this is exactly what Final Fantasy IX Remake is going to be, you better all show up for this game. I mean, every single last one of you that is in my comment section. I know who you are. I see you. And I want every single one of you to go out there and support this game, because if it does end up doing that, we could definitely end up seeing more turn-based Final Fantasy games, more traditional ones, as you guys claim that you want. And this is the opportunity, maybe, assuming, to finally have that voice be heard. And this is the opportunity, maybe, presumably, to have that voice be heard, and I think it is an important vote to cast. As far as multi-platform goes, someone said here, really hope that Square Enix Sony exclusives are over. Midori replied, Square Enix is not prioritizing exclusives anymore, this includes on PC. There will still probably be exceptions for some titles and titles that already have publishing deals, but the titles I am discussing will also be released on Steam. It's not just Epic Game Store anymore. We're kind of already seeing this now with the fact that the Kingdom Hearts collection has finally come to Steam, but this means that we could potentially see Final Fantasy VII Rebirth on Steam day one with its PC release. We don't know for sure, and again, she mentions here that it's not for titles that already have publishing deals. I would be willing to bet that Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3 even already has a publishing deal that is in place. So some of these titles that were already in the pipeline probably already have deals with the publisher, but it seems like everything else proceeding forward after that is probably not going to have one. And again, this includes Final Fantasy IX Remake. So for those of you who are going to want to play this on PC, again, it's not officially confirmed for PC, but they do seem to be targeting as many platforms, as many stores on PC as they possibly can. This is Square Enix's new strategy, as Kiryu, the new CEO, has outlined, and hopefully it is going to allow these games to sell a lot more and not repeat the same sort of failings that Final Fantasy XVI and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth had with their exclusivity. Not that I think that exclusivity is necessarily the only reason that those games didn't sell as well as they could have. I seem to be the only one who seems to identify that as a problem, even as everyone else seems to think that multi-platform is the only issue there. We'll talk more on that in a later video. But what's most important here is that Final Fantasy IX Remake, in either case, Final Fantasy IX Remake is seemingly real. But I think with everyone knowing about it, at least a teaser would probably be a good idea at this point. But these are just my thoughts on Final Fantasy IX Remake, and I'd love to hear yours. So please drop them in the comments below. And I'll see you all in the next video.